We're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. That's right, you're listening to Coming Out Christian, a podcast about life at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith. This fun, faithful, and sometimes irreverent podcast is a production of Love Boldly, an Ohio-based nonprofit creating spaces where LGBTQIA+ people can flourish in Christianity. I'm one of your hosts, Siobhan Boyd Nelson, and my co-host is the Reverend Dr. Ben Hillscamp, Executive Director of Love Boldly. So join us, and let's find out who's coming out today. Hello, hello, hello. How are you today, Reverend Dr. Ben?
I'm doing well, and how are you, Siobhan?
I am doing wonderfully. I am enjoying spring because it really is one of my favorite seasons. I'm a spring and summer type of gal. And here we are at the end of May, Memorial Day. Weekend is upon us, and it is barbecue season. So that is also another season that I am a huge fan of. What about you, Ben?
So I have some very strong thoughts on barbecue, having lived in North Carolina particularly.
Okay.
And I'd just like to say, for anyone out there who thinks about the normal Midwestern barbecue here in Ohio or other parts of the Midwest and says, that's not barbecue, I see you, I hear you, you're right, but we're never going to win them all over.
Or not, or my wife is from the deep South. I think barbecue is close to being a religion. There's multiple meats that are barbecued at a meal, right? Like these folks, they will have 3-4 different barbecued meats at a single holiday meal. And I think that Shay would agree with that. We're not getting real barbecue here. You really got to go to the South to get this.
Well, and there's also some really fierce competition between, even in the South, what is actual barbecue. Again,
Yes.
having lived in North Carolina, I am partial to vinegar-based barbecue.
Okay.
I wonder, given where Shay's from, I wonder what they would consider true barbecue.
They are not going to be a vinegar-based person. They are not that. Yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Similar to grits, because I am a person who enjoys both a savory and a sweet grit. I'm going to enjoy both a vinegar barbecue and a non-vinegar. I'm even going to enjoy a mustard barbecue, honestly. If it's a good sauce, it's a good sauce.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to be too strict on that. Just give me good food, right? And then don't forget to invite me to the cookout. That is I don't know if you've heard that reference before about getting the invitation to the cookout, Ben.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, to the Black Cookout. When you get an invitation to the Black Cookout, and Mark, our guest today, who is a Black person, is laughing at me and Ben, I think you would get an invitation to the cookout. What do you think, Mark?
Yes, for sure.
Yes. Okay,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. You get an invitation to the cookout, Ben. But let's jump in. Let's introduce today's guest. I'm so excited for this conversation with Mark Wesley, who uses he, they pronouns. Mark is a culture writer, podcaster, an ever doubtful Christian. My goodness, do I love that description. Mark was born and raised in the DMV. For those that don't know, that is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area where I went to college at Howard University. So love the DMV, but resides here in Central Ohio now and is one of my fellow board members at Love Boldly. Welcome, Mark. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. We like to start with the question, what is your testimony? What is your story, Mark, at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith?
Yeah, my testimony really starts around 2014, 15 or so. I always knew that I was queer. It took me a long time to kind of come to terms with it. But around 2014, 15 or so, I had a really rough year. I tried to go to college for the first time when I was 17. Didn't work out as much at the time. And so my following year, 2015, I was in just doing Columbus State for a little bit here in the city. And I had a job downtown at Columbus State, and I was meeting a lot of people that I hadn't normally met before because I was normally kind of in my Gahanna, Ohio bubble where I was living at the time. And through being downtown and walking around downtown, I met people that I hadn't really met before, and I was being introduced to new ways and to express queerness. And one of those ways was talking to people that were like, "Yeah, I'm religious. I'm Christian." And I in my brain's like, "What? That does not compute. That doesn't make any sense to me." And so having those talks with folks and kind of realizing that you can do both. As I got older and I became more aware of these things, I began to recognize that like there's a beautiful kind of tapestry here that queerness envelops, and it contains so much, and it is such an expansive thing. And so as I began to kind of grow and get older, like I said before, I really began to recognize that in myself. And here we are now. I think I'm growing every day, of course, but we're getting there. But it's recognizing that that's the most important thing for me.
Now, you describe yourself as an ever doubtful Christian. Could you
Mhm.
expand on that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I got that from Joseph Solomon, who I love. He's an amazing singer-songwriter from Los Angeles. He had a podcast called Flights and Feelings, which touched on this topic. Um, for me, what that means is I'm always kind of asking questions. I'm always observing, trying to kind of see what's really going on in a subject. I went to school for journalism, so that's kind of all I really do. And so a lot of that for me is just being really aware of what's going on and being sure not to just look at things on a base surface level, but asking questions and being having the room to doubt. I think a lot of folks, myself included, grew up being told you can't doubt the church, just accept it, everything as it is. And I never really took that as gospel. Like this doesn't make any sense. We should always ask questions. And so to me, being an ever doubtful Christian means being curious, it's being woke as people would say, and it's being conscious, it's being like aware of what's really happening, asking questions.
So, how did you grow up? Because you said it seemed like you had this light bulb moment where you went, "Whoa, I can be queer and Christian." What was it in your background that led you to believe that that wasn't a possibility?
Yeah, my so I was born and raised in the DMV area. My whole family is religious. My mother has worked in like for churches as deacons and close to alongside churches. So I've been in church my whole life, and one of the things that was really drilled into me growing up was Christianity is a very, I would say, binary thing, and it's one or the other. There's no other path you can go. It's very flow charted, is what I would used to say. I mean, you go down one path, you marry the right person, you have a good, fruitful life, and I think that was what I was chasing for a while. Yeah, up until I think around the pandemic or so, I was kind of searching for that kind of white picket fence kind of lifestyle. And what I found was that it's kind of all an illusion. It's not really attainable. It's not really sustainable. Even people within that kind of, binary system are struggling themselves with a lot of the same things. And so I figured, why would I try and like contain who I really am inside and try and achieve this unattainable kind of thing where I can be myself, take the risk of, being black and queer in the world, right? And all the things that presents, and just do the best I can, live as free as I can right now. And a lot of this, I'm sure we'll get into this too. A lot of being black and queer and juggling identities, it's a juggling act, right? It's a balancing act. And so that was one of the harder things for me, was realizing that you can be black and queer and Christian, and those things don't have to override each other. It can be just kind of all on one level. And so that was really, really important to me, kind of balance that out.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that as a juggling act of,
Mhm.
black identity, queer identity, and Christian identity, because in our culture, we often are made to feel like we have to choose one
Yeah.
or the other or two out of three. We can't do all of these things at once. How is that playing out in your life right now? That kind of holding those three identities in balance. How do you do that? How do you live that out in a daily way?
A good question. I think you kind of just, and this might not make sense to folks that are not a part of a marginalized group, but you kind of just do it, if that makes sense. Like where the rapper Vince Staples had this quote. He was asked about why he loves hip hop as a black person from California. He's like, when do you, I'm born in it. Like I'm in it. Like that's just my identity. I never had to kind of say, oh, I like hip hop today. It's just you were always born in that idea, and that's kind of how it was for me. Like I was born in this. Like I grew up black Christian. The gospel music is like in my DNA. It's like same part of me that loves like go-go music from DC. That's I love gospel the same way. I love it's just in my DNA, right? And so I guess the balancing act for me was figuring out how to not to suppress one versus the other. Because I was really ashamed for a long time in all those areas. I think growing up in Maryland, I wasn't black enough. Like I had to struggle with that. Because I liked music that wasn't just black music. I liked rock music. I like all these other things. And as I grew older, I realized, oh, it's all black. It's all black. All of this is black music. So that was a real issue for me. And then when I realized I was queer, I was like, oh, I had to suppress that too, because you can't be too black, you can't be too queer, you can't be too this and that, right? And so it was that balancing of saying I can be all of this, like I can just show up as myself fully, not to have one thing override the other thing.
I see Ben thinking very deeply about this. So while Ben continues thinking, Mark, I'm going to ask you. You mentioned gospel music. Is that
Mhm.
something that you continue to listen to today? I
Yeah.
have a weird relationship with gospel music,
Mhm.
where I have to have my wife preview the music first.
Mhm. Yeah.
Then once they've had a listen to it and there aren't any anti-queer lyrics in it,
Mhm.
then I can say, okay, now I can listen to this gospel song. Because if for those that don't listen to gospel music, anti-queer lyrics will just pop up in a
Yeah.
gospel song just out of nowhere. There's a lot of ad-libbing often in gospel music, and
Mhm.
queerness comes up a lot in the Black church, Southern Baptist, Apostolic, Pentecostal, all of these different denominations that kind of
Mhm.
lend to gospel music and also are typically Black churches. How do you deal with that, Mark? That kind of like, ooh, is this song gonna trigger me today?
Yeah, no, of course. I do listen to it still. I think the filtering for me is more of a it's a vibe that I get most of the time, I find. So my partner and I have a playlist. I was telling them about like, when you're black growing up on Saturdays, you're probably listening to some version of gospel or jazz or both or whatever. So this is what I was doing. And so we made a playlist surrounding that where we kind of curate it to what we like. And a lot of the music that I listened to back then is on a spiritual level, it feels it connects me back to my youth. It's not like I'm my youth, but like you know what I mean. Like it connects me back to my roots in that way. And so I think the filtering out for me is more so I listen to a lot of music every day, all the time, and part of that comes with reading lyrics and analyzing what's going on. And if the vibe of a song is also just wrong, I just avoid it most of the time. So I've gotten very good at kind of recognizing this isn't really for me. This isn't what I'm listening to today. So I'm very good at blocking that stuff out. But also I will do the work and just be like, okay, this has this line in it. I'm just gonna not engage with this at all. It's just not for me. But yeah, so much of that is very much like it's sprinkled in there. You have to kind of like look for it and listen to it because it is in there. It may not be like on the surface all the time, but it will be present in some of these cases.
So as Siobhan noticed before, I am sitting here trying to think of a way to ask a lot of questions that what you're saying brings up for me, Mark.
Mhm.
But what I'm struggling with, and I'm just going to name, is the very different reality. And Mark, you and I have talked about this before between being a black queer Christian,
Mhm.
or black Christian, or however we want to rearrange those words, and being a white queer Christian.
Yeah.
What that means. Actually, I think the first time you ever came to a Love Boldly event, that was our conversation.
Yeah.
And it's something that I always think about when you and I talk. So again, I'm just sort of naming that. Um, I'm not even sure what question to ask because, I as a person, as a Christian, as a queer Christian, I've never had to have that extra experience of of I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. Perhaps of being able, one of the parts of my white privilege is being able to walk into a church and not stand out immediately.
Hmm.
There are almost no churches, at least no historically white churches, that I can't walk into and tamper down the gates thing for a while, and be otherwise accepted. I might
Hmm.
stand out a little bit, but that's about it. Um, so again, I'm just trying to name why I'm not asking questions right now is because I'm having so much trouble finding something to ask from my limited experience of what you're talking about.
Sure. Well, I can speak to that too. I think there's I won't name the church because I don't want to do that, but there was a place that I was attending for a long time. I was living in Lewis Center, with my mom, and I was trying to achieve that. I think I liked the coziness of church, like of white church. It felt kind of like it was very calm. It felt very like you get it. You get what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was very calm. It felt very, oh, it's nice. I get to hang with all these nice white folks and their families and kind of just sit with them and kind of talk to them and have coffee, and it was great. And then you get to a moment where they talk about something that's kind of like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. Like they mentioned something about Trump or politics that's just really off the cuff, and it kind of disrupts that, right? And so what I realized was you can't ignore that. That part of you, no matter how hard you try to push it down, will always kind of like, oh, that's a problem. And you can definitely try your best, and people for sure have done that, but they're denying the part of themselves. They're like, "Oh, this is not for me." And I definitely try to get involved. I was definitely involved a bit in that place, but as I left that church and I realized that this wasn't really what I wanted to do, I began to kind of realize that a lot of this stuff, again, it's unattainable. Like the actual system that keeps this in place is not sustainable at all, and it's all smoke and mirrors. At least to me, that's how it felt for me.
So I wanted to ask that, Mark, and so I'm glad that Ben brought it up and that you spoke to it, um, because, like Ben said, there are so many churches that he can walk into and feel comfortable. And then, Mark, you brought up the fact that when you go to these churches, which are often Lutheran or Methodist or
Mhm.
Episcopal, right, or even affirming Catholic churches, where it's a calm environment.
Mhm.
It is very liturgical. There is a method to it. And as someone who grew up in the Black church, I can only do that, one or two Sundays a year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's something missing from that. So for me, when I've walked into those churches, and I just want to say, please continue doing what you're doing. Continue to be
Mhm.
affirming. Continue to be opening and welcoming of people of color. Please don't
Mhm.
give up, right? Just because I'm saying that I'm not comfortable there doesn't mean that your efforts, uh, that effort shouldn't be made. But
Of course.
there was something still missing. There was some substance still missing there. And so, what has um, do you have a community of faith? What has your journey
Mhm.
to find a community of faith look like? Or is that even something that you're looking for?
Yeah, I will be honest. I have not walked into a church since I think I was at a Blue Ocean last, which is a couple months ago. I feel like um, I haven't felt the need to do it. And I guess part of the reason why is I'm sure we'll get to this at some point, but the ways that Christianity has been used politically have really kind of shaken me, and a lot of my friends feel the same way. And a lot of the questions that I have about church and religion now, they just don't feel like I can get answers to those questions without, um, another kind of situation happening. So I feel like in a lot of cases, my faith community is my friends, like my loved ones, my support group, like I both virtual and in person. I've made such amazing friendships, and one thing I will say that has helped me a lot with this is making newer friends and making having older friends come back out in my life and talk to them again. Those connections are really important too. But and I do have Christian friends who will say I am Christian, but um, they don't they don't like push it too much. And they know that I'm passionate about this. They know that I care about this, but it's never a thing where you have to do this. And that's really, really important to me because I am skeptical. I am really kind of concerned about the ways that we're going about this in the country right now. And I think that at least for this period of time, I'm kind of just sitting this one out and kind of watching people do. Which is how I felt in 2020 as well. I love to talk about that at some point too, because that was really a big year for me as far as actually wanting to do the work, actually wanting to do the Christian work, and then kind of seeing the response from the church. It shook me to my core. And I couldn't hang around that kind of community anymore. So I took a step back, then I haven't really gone back since. So
Will you say more about that? What was so you were? It sounds like you were part of a faith community,
yeah.
and were like, I'm going to do the work, the Christian work, right? I'm here to be a worker bee in this community of faith. And
Mhm.
what was the response that you got?
Yeah, for me that work was essentially just trying to. It was during the pandemic, so I was coming out of. I was still in school at the time, and I was graduating in the fall. And so a lot of the work that I was doing was just like I was working at a church at the time, and they were great. Shout out to them, they're amazing, no problem with them at all. But a lot of it was just tithes, doing social media work, and just other things that I was doing at the time, and it felt good. It felt like I was actually like because COVID had all of our brains kind of just like I had to get involved, I had to do something. So that was where my brain was at. And so I was heavily immersed in Christian content every day. I was listening to Christian music all the time. I was following a lot of Christian content creators online. I was watching church services. So I was really involved, at least in the day-to-day Christian activities. And the shift for me was George Floyd. Like that summer was just it was just crazy. And I remember I put on my socials at the time. I was like, you need church, like church, capital C church. You have to respond to this. This cannot be just a fly by night. Oh well, no, there are black people in your churches that care about this, and your lack of response, or your, in some cases, outright ridiculous response of, you know, it is what it is, whatever. They're going to see that, and they're going to have issues with that. And I was just shocked at the response that the church had, and that they still continue to have even years later after that. It was really alarming to me, and I think the real kind of moment for me past that, which is where I legitimately stopped going to church entirely, was January 6th. That moment for me was absolutely like it was like the sun was beaming into the room. I was like, this is wild. I in no way can be a part of this, at least as it is currently. So I had to take a step back, and I haven't really gone back since.
Mark, you can see me here just nodding my
Yeah.
head so vigorously because
Yeah.
I had such a similar experience. I was
Mhm.
very heavily involved in a church leading up to 2020. I was on the board of that church. I was doing church all the time. And then the pandemic happened, and I got even more deeply involved creating content, creating online church. And that's a whole production
Mhm.
of doing online church. And then I felt a similar lack of response or poor response
Mhm.
to the George Floyd situation, and specifically my level of activism
Yeah.
and the level of activism I had in the community at the time. And that's kind of when my spidey sense started going off, where I said, it's a pandemic. I am Black. I am queer. I am a woman. And yet I am given an awful lot to this faith community and being
Mhm.
asked for more, right? And
Yeah.
continually being asked to do more work. And then got to January 6th, literally called my pastor. I mean,
Mhm.
it was a crisis of faith. I think I felt the same way. I think we were seeing it the same way, Mark, of what is going on with the world. Called my pastor, did not get the response that I needed.
Yeah.
And that was about it. Like I essentially fell off at that point
Mhm.
because not only in the past I have been traumatized, my queer identity had experienced trauma in the church. And then
Mhm.
here in a church that had accepted my queer identity, my Black identity was being traumatized. And
Yeah.
so it yet another trauma experience meant that I needed to take a break as well.
And it's difficult because I think you expect, or I expected, I'm sure you did as well, like protection from this, at least as far as like community around this. Like you expected to have people that you see every Sunday, or maybe more than that, your life groups or whatever. Like you expect people that you know well. I've been over to people's houses before. I've met their kids. Like you would see the parallels here between what's happening politically and how this is being used, and you will see how important this is to me. And constantly, you hear it all the time. Oh, that's that's not really important. We need to focus on this. And a lot of the time I remember my brain, I was just thinking like, do you not see how this is important to people? This is a really big deal. And the fact that, and I'm a big fan of Brandon Robertson's TikTok because he's a great job of talking about this too on social media. It's like at a certain point it becomes more of like you're ignoring the issue, and like the people that are behind these systems, people that are pushing these things are so blatantly unchristian that anybody that's saying that they are or following Christ is just kind of like I question what you think Christianity really is. Even this past year with I don't remember her name, so I apologize for that. But the reverend who was speaking to Trump and JD Vance, saying, "Please have mercy on people," and the response was, "Oh, that's a woke person." I'm like, what are we doing? like
That's Jesus. Like that's
that's
literally
that's
Jesus.
literally Jesus. Like I
Yeah.
don't know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Bishop Mary Ann Budd. Is that the correct pronunciation, Ben?
Buddy,
Buddy. Okay,
Buddy.
yes. Bishop
Mary and
Mary Ann
Buddy.
Buddy. Yeah. And it's literally and the idea that they would call that woke
Mhm.
in a way that is bad with a negative connotation, not recognizing that wokeness is following Jesus. Jesus was
Like,
a radical. Jesus would have been called woke
yes.
by the Christian or excuse me, by the religious leaders of
Mhm.
his society in that day.
Yeah.
And their inability to see that it is disturbing. I'm
Yeah.
right there with you, Mark. It is absolutely disturbing. All right. Ben, I want to let you jump in with another question before we wrap up with Mark and get to our query of the day.
Yeah. I, this may be a weird question for us to end on,
Mhm.
so I fully would say take this wherever you want, Mark, and
Mhm.
Siobhan, please jump in if you have something else. But when you think about pastors, clergy, the church, or however we define that big C church, or the
Mhm.
more institutional parts of the church, what have you come to really expect from ministers, from clergy, from leaders in the church? Um,
Mhm.
uh, Particularly given both what you experienced growing up as well as what you've experienced as an adult.
I guess a backbone. Like that, I guess that makes sense. I mean, honestly, like I think that's the big thing for me is like having the having the courage. Like, yeah, this is wrong. This is wrong. There are people in our congregation that are affected by this, and just having and I think too many churches, too many pastors buckle under that pressure, of having your more conservative right-leaning base in your church push back and worry about them leaving. And I'm not in that position, so I can't speak to that at all. But I think it's really important that you churches and pastors have a backbone to and point out clearly this is not okay. This is not how this should be. This goes completely against the teachings that you come to listen to me talk about every week. And it's fundamentally wrong. And granted, and there are pastors that do this. So again, I'm not saying that all pastors like this, not at all. There are some that I follow that are absolutely amazing, and they talk about this stuff every time that I see them on my feed, and that's amazing. But again, capital C church, we have to recognize that there are some people that plan to distort the message of Jesus and turn it into something negative. It's been happening for years, and it's hit like a fever pitch right now. And having the backbone to say, yes, I don't care what your affiliation is politically, this is wrong. I'm going to say that it's wrong. And if you lead, that's on you. Having the backbone to say that is really important, especially now with people with Doge, whoever, like wiping out programs and rolling back things that have been safeguards for us. Like, if there was ever a moment where we had to have community like, linchpins kind of like uphold systems of protection for marginalized people, it's now. It has to be now because I said that 5 years ago. It's like this has to happen now because if it happens, it keeps happening. We're gonna hit a point where all the things that have kept us kind of safe will be gone. It will all be gone, and we'll be back to square one, and we'll do it all over again. So I would say just have a
Amen. Amen, Mark. I think that's the best answer. I'm going to 100% agree with that. Um, and know that, that's not in everyone. Not every,
yeah.
one thing I've learned about ministers and clergy is that, they have different gifts and they're better at certain things than others, but there has to be someone with a backbone in that church. Right. And the big C church, again, these larger systems, these denominations really need to be stepping up and using their voice. I think I said before, I used to advocate in the state house, and the voice of clergy is still a very loud voice in the state house, and there are simply not enough clergy who are stepping up and pushing back against blatant lies. I mean, I like to say that they be lying on Jesus. And the clergy are not stepping up to say, hey, y'all are lying on Jesus. And that offends me. It offends me. It worries me. And the church is going to have to take up this burden. When we lose these programs, when we lose these safeguards, it is the church, big C church's job to be doing the work of clothing the unclothed and healing the sick and feeding the poor. So either you're going to step up and say the words now, or you're going to have to pick up the pieces when those words have the impact that they're intended to have.
Yeah. And this, I want to say also, this is fixable. I really want to combat the notion that, because I think a lot of people, myself included, I can definitely fall into like pessimism and nihilism sometimes where it's like nothing matters. Like, so why do we care about this? And I think that a large part of recognizing like there's a future after this, right? There is a path forward. And the beauty, I think, of being, not to get super like, myopic or whatever, but there's the beauty of like leftism and being queer is there's so many paths forward. All of us have a diverse view of the future, and for most part, all of that can be attainable. It's very attainable. It's realizing that there's a problem, speaking to that problem, and then working to solve it. And that's very simplistic and very easy to say while we're like kind of in it right now, but it's possible. And our ancestors shown that it was possible. Like this isn't we didn't just start here. We got here from a long line of folks that came before us and told us this is the game plan for this. You can fix this. You just have to figure out how to do it within the framework of your current day. And it's hard. It's for sure hard, but it's definitely possible.
Thank you for helping us end on that positive note, Mark. I really appreciate you reminding us that, yes, there is a path forward. And as queer people, we are really the best situated to find and kind of navigate that path
Yeah.
because our identities are identities that allow for so many different realities. So thank you. All right, let's go back and let's go to our query of the day. And I'm going to go back into cookout mode. And I am going to ask Mark and Reverend Dr. Ben, what food has to be at the cookout for it to be a cookout, right? Like if you show up and there's none of this, then it ain't really a cookout, right? I mean, I guess you got together in a backyard and ate some food on a lawn chair, but it wasn't a cookout. Mark, what do you think? What got to be there for it to be a real cookout?
So I have my Maryland answer, and I have my Midwestern normal person answer. We'll say my Maryland answer. You have to have crab, some seafood, but crab especially. Like one thing I miss about DMV, Maryland especially, is there was a crab shack on every corner. Like where I grew up in Landover, there was one like down the street from my house. Like Joe's Crab Shack. Like it was great. Like it was fantastic. That's a real place. And you would get crab but by the bucket. It was amazing. And I would have Baltimore crabs with my family, and we would just have them there, and it was beautiful and it was delicious. And I want more of those, please. I know Ohio crab isn't as good, but like crab. And then I guess besides that, ribs. I'm a big ribs guy. I love making them myself. And so anytime I'm in charge of cooking for a big meal, I will always have ribs just ready to go. And so once again, a recipe that I found online was from a Black queer person. So we know how to get down. We know how to get down. So ribs if we're just chilling here in Ohio, but if we're back home, it's crabs all day.
Dr. Ben, what you need at a cookout?
So there are three things. And I'm about to really show my family's background. First, there have to be bratwursts. And yes, I am like almost 100% of German heritage. But there have to be bratwursts. Second, there has to be potato salad because, I'm from the Midwest. And my third, and Siobhan, I think you'll agree with me on this one, there have to be deviled eggs. There's nothing better than a deviled egg. And thankfully, I have a few people in my family who make killer deviled eggs.
Okay, so first Ben showed his North Central Ohio roots there with the bratwurst. And then I also want to note that Mark says Maryland, and that is such a DMV thing. There is no A, it is not Maryland.
It's
It is
Maryland.
Maryland. It's Maryland.
Yep.
Love it. You took me right back there, Mark. Amazing. I was going to say deviled eggs, Ben, but I think I've mentioned deviled eggs so many times already on this podcast. But my other favorite food is macaroni and cheese. I make killer macaroni and cheese. I either have to have that or macaroni salad. I get it that sometimes you don't want macaroni and cheese in the middle of the summer, but I do need an elbow macaroni noodle and some creaminess. And because I'm a big girl, I love the sides. Meat's great, ribs are great, but it's really all about the sides. So give me an elbow macaroni shape, please. All right, Reverend Dr. Ben, what do you have for us in our moment in queer Christian history, reminding us that not only have we always been here, we have always been here in the church?
So I just want to know we are recording this episode on March 20th. And March 20th happens to be the birthday of a man by the name of Dr. John Boswell. Boswell was a historian, openly queer Catholic man. He taught at Yale for many years and was one of the very early writers. And of course, I say very early in the sense of he was working in like the mid 60s and onward, and in the 70s. But Boswell was one of the first historians to really look at not just queer history, but at queer Christian history. Largely, I would argue, due to homophobia, he was largely discredited. A lot of people wanted to really pick apart what he was writing, because he's a queer person right by queer people. But he really did pioneer some of the early studies, historical studies of the queer community from a positive lens, and particularly the queer Christian community. Unfortunately, Boswell, like many men of his generation, we lost to AIDS when he was only 47. He would be 78 if he was still alive today.
Wow. Well, thank you, Ben, for sharing Dr. John Boswell with us. Unfortunately, we definitely know that as marginalized communities, we are often discredited when we try to tell our own stories. The majority is allowed to tell our stories, but we're not allowed to tell them ourselves. So thank you, Mark, for being here, because this is part of the way that we preserve our queer history and do that work of telling our own stories. And it has just been absolutely amazing to hear your story and to share this conversation with you. Is there anything that you would like to talk about or promote as we wrap up?
Yeah, first, again, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this conversation. I will be, as far as plugging things, I'm not really on social media that much, just because of, things happening in the world, right? But you can find me. I'm on Blue Sky, at Heart Plus on Blue Sky. I'm also occasionally on Instagram. My name is Full Heart Machine. I am a writer. I write about music and a lot about culture. You can find my writing on inbetweendrafts.com. I'm a writer for about music and games. I also do a lot of culture writing, which will be happening on Substack soon. So guess that'll be a thing that'll be happening down the line. So promote that at some point as well. I'm also featured on the Love devotional that'll be coming out as well. So that's really exciting. I'm excited to talk about hip hop for my section. That was really a great time. So I appreciate Ben for letting me do that. And yeah, just follow me on Blue Sky and on Instagram. And if you want to talk to me more, just message me and I'll have the chat. So
Yes, and catch Mark at a Love Boldly event, and
yes.
Hanging out at probably our interfaith service and other Pride events that are coming up very quickly here. So thank you again, Mark. This has been an amazing conversation, and thank you, Reverend Dr. Ben.
Thank you.
All right, this has been another episode of Coming Out Christian. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Coming Out Christian with Siobhan Boyd Nelson and me, Ben Hillscamp. Do you want to see content like this continue to be produced? Then please support Love Boldly with a donation and consider becoming a monthly donor. You can donate online at www.loveboldly.net/donate. Join us next time as we continue to engage with people who proudly say that we're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. And we're not going anywhere.